Welcome to our weekly Governance Voice. This is a program brought to you every Friday between 7:30 and 8 a.m. to discuss issues of governance. The program is brought to you courtesy of the Institute of Certified Secretaries and powered by Bafunde. I am your host, Obare Nyaega. This morning we are discussing a very interesting topic called investments market. And with us in studio is FCS Job Kihumba to take us through this very important topic. And I'll talk briefly about FCS Kihumba, about his profile and background. Mr. Kihumba has been in the capital markets industry for over 30 years and was the first CEO of NSC when it became a formal market in 1989. He has served as the chairman of the Institute of Certified Secretaries and ICIFA and was the founder chairman of CCG in 1999. He has a fellowship status both at the Institute of Certified Secretaries and ICIFA. He has served in various industry committees and task forces, including committee that developed the CMA Code on Corporate Governance and Stewardship Code. He currently serving as a director at the Standard Investment Bank. Karibu sana FCS to the studio.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Yes.
You've been in this market for many years, and the first thing is that most of us don't understand very well this particular market. Could you probably talk to us about the industry in general, the investment market industry as a whole?
Thank you very much. The investment industry, as you have said, is the industry that really takes care of people who want to invest. And there are many forms of investment. Some people invest in shares, others in government boards. There are all sorts of investment, but the formal market, as we understand it, what we call the securities market, is the ones that is centered around the Nairobi Securities Exchange and which is regulated by the Capital Markets Authority.
All right.
Yeah.
The investment market also has so many terminologies. Yes. I mean, we hear of so many things about the market. If you could just take a few of these very complicated terms and just demystify them to the viewers.
Thank you very much. It is not easy to demystify all of them in a time like this one, okay. But maybe I could mention a few that are commonly mentioned in our market. Mm-hmm. Let me start first of all by saying the financial market itself. The financial market is basically a place where people transact investment products, and that leads me now to what are investment products. Mm-hmm. Investment products are sometimes called investment instruments, and these are basically arrangements that identify a specific service that is being provided by the industry. Say, for example, the shares. A share is actually an instrument used in the investment industry or a government board. Mm-hmm. So when we talk of products, those kind of services, those kind of specified tools mm-hmm. that allow you to trade in that non-physical, because these are not physical goods. If you go to the Nairobi Securities Exchange, you will see like a goat market where you can see the goats. Mm-hmm. You only hear people talking about products, but you can't see them. But they are there and they are real. They are actually, as in another way, you are calling them financial assets. Mm-hmm. The other one I can mention is the financial services regulator, because the financial sector regulator has come lately to be mentioned very many times. The financial services regulator, in our case, is a Capital Markets Authority, which is charged by the government or mandated by the government to provide an oversight over these markets, mm-hmm. to ensure there is fairness, there is order, and there is what I would call accountability and transparency in how these markets are done. Mm-hmm. I could also mention, because this is also mentioned, stockbrokers, investment banks, fund managers. These are all terms that are used to refer to certain groups of people, say like the investment banks and stockbrokers. These are people who are licensed by the Capital Markets Authority to provide the service of buying and selling of securities. Mm-hmm. The difference between a stockbroker and an investment bank is essentially the ranking they have and what they can do. A stockbroker would generally only be expected to buy and sell securities on behalf of investors. An investment bank will go a step higher by being allowed to buy on its own name and trade in its own name. In other words, it has a higher ranking in that regard. So we can say that an investment bank is higher in hierarchy. There are also investment advisors, people who have no money to buy and sell on behalf of clients, but they can advise clients. They can advise investors on what to do. Basically, that's what I would say.
All right. You have mentioned very many players within that particular industry.
Yes.
Maybe it will also be important, even as we try and look deeper into this particular market, to try and pick some of these players in the industry and what role they play.
The players do play. Let me first of all demystify what the difference between commercial banking, because that has been asked many times, and investment banking.
Okay.
Commercial banking provide a service to depositors. They receive deposits from people, and they can also lend. They don't ordinarily invest. Of course, there are certain aspects where they can invest, but ordinarily they get money from depositors and lend. On the other hand, investment banks receive money from investors for purposes of investment, not for purposes of lending. So investment banks don't lend. And I'm emphasizing this because many people have come to our offices saying they want to borrow. And we say we don't lend, but we can invest on their behalf, including investing on their behalf on what I would call credit instruments like bonds, which really they can buy, or corporate bonds or treasury bonds, they can actually buy them. So that is basically a good thing to start. But all these players that are in the market, each one of them have a role. And these roles are very well specified within the regulations. In fact, not in one of them that is not defined and what is their specific roles. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So do you want to mention one or two of these players? So at least we see even within
Let me mention, because I've already mentioned the investment banks and stockbrokers. Let me mention fund managers.
Okay. Okay.
Because fund managers is a unique player within the market. What they do is that they actually receive investment products, investment classes, and then they actually, with their own expertise, they invest this money. So a stockbroker could actually ask a fund manager to invest certain things on their behalf. Or a pension program could ask a fund manager to invest, to learn the investment process. They do what we call portfolio management. They choose which investments to put their money in. Remember that all these are being done to increase the return available to the investor. So a fund manager, or sometimes they are also called asset managers, have a very important role of being the expert arm of the market that actually buys or decides where to buy and sell. But it's a very tricky balance, because sometimes the fund managers, if they want, for example, to put an order to buy shares that are listed on the stock market, they give the order to a broker or to an investment bank. But if an investor wants to put their money with a fund manager so that it can be invested, they will go directly to a fund manager for this purpose. So there's a lot of interconnection between all these players. Yeah.
Do you think these very many players cause out of confusion, and yet makes it a bit more difficult for some of the investors?
You may say so, but because they have specific rules, and I want to emphasize this. These divisions come because of the need to create what I would call checks and balances in the market.
Okay.
And they have not even mentioned that there are even people called custodians. And for example, custodians, the work of the role of the custodian is to actually ensure the securities in their name remain secure for whom they are supposed to be. Say, for example, foreign investors, if they buy securities that are listed on the stock exchange, they will buy them through a stockbroker, and sometimes order coming through a fund manager, but the actual keeper, the custody will be with a custodian. And custodians generally are commercial banks who have a license from Capital Markets Authority to do custodial work. So there are quite many people. And as I said, it's not very easy to explain the difference for each one of them. But each one of them have a role to improve transparency, accountability, and ensure that no single firm has the totality of the transaction. It's actually the transactions, various aspects of the transactions are divided so that they are protected.
So basically, all these players in that governance kind of infrastructure, they are meant for checks and balances.
They have checks and balances and specializations, because they also specialize in different things. For example, a commercial bank specializes in taking care of funds belonging to other people. So they can be custodians.
Quite a technical discussion. Maybe we go back to what we have seen in the media, people actually complaining about putting their money in some investment and then some of that, their investment somehow goes down. You've seen social media, you've seen people really crying about some of these investment, but also you have talked about that there are checks and balances within the market. So how do we then ensure that people like those are safeguarded, and in case there's recourse, beyond going to court, what other, within that framework?
One of the things I must say is that there are a lot of safeguards available in the market. The first point of call is that these players are all licensed. And to get a license, you have to go through a vetting process. And so that's the first point, that any player in the market, whether it's a stockbroker, investment bank, a fund manager, custodian, all these have to go through a process of vetting before they get the license, because that is the essence of a license. Number two, the Capital Markets Authority have developed rules and regulations specifically that are meant to protect investors. And there are quite a bunch of these rules. They are very, very elaborate. And so that's the other point. Number three, the Capital Markets Authority and the other market players that have not even mentioned, like the Nairobi Securities Exchange, the Central Depository System, have a mechanism of tracking what every player is doing. For example, if you come to me and put an order to buy 1 million shares in Safaricom, for example, that trade will appear as a trade at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. But Capital Markets Authority have an online inspection software that can be able to see that an order of 1 million shares went through, and the parties involved in this. So if they have any query, they can actually be able to ask before even if it is settled. The CDSC, the Central Depository and Settlement Corporation, is a clearing arm. So if a trade takes place, it is not settled between the two brokers who buy and sell. It is settled through the CDSC, the Central Depository and Settlement Corporation. And that also ensures that before the order is executed, that the shares are there in the first place. They will check whether they have been deposited with them. Because do remember that we operate in a fairly, in an environment that is fairly protected in every way, including putting shares and other securities in a depository. Sorry to use those kind of words, because when I mention them, then it requires that maybe I explain what they are. A depository is a place where all the shares of listed companies are kept for what you call safekeeping. They are registered there, and we operate in what we call a demobilized or dematerialized environment. A dematerialized environment is where there is no more physical paper that passes across. It is all in electronic format. It is highly digitized. So what is going on there is that all these parties, now the Securities Exchange, the Central Depository, the CMA itself, all have a capacity to inspect what is or know what is going on. This is another way of protecting investors. However, if an investor loses money by an action of any of those licensed people, there is a mechanism called investor compensation. You can actually go to the Capital Markets Authority for to seek redress in terms of what you have lost. And they have, of course, they may not cover everything, but they cover a certain portions of what has been may have been lost. But it has only to be lost in the hands of a licensed person. Mm-hmm. If you put money in the hands of an unlicensed person, then you have no recourse to that. So that is also tricky. A lot of people I hear complaining have not lost money through licensed players. Okay. They have lost money through people who are not licensed. Okay. And this is, sometimes we call them con people or fraudsters. Okay. And that's where a lot of money is lost. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Mm. You've actually given a very good assurance there that, and then we need to understand that there must be somebody that has to be licensed.
Yeah.
It's a critical thing.
Yeah.
But let's talk to industries also and players who have actually also collapsed as companies.
Yes.
And what we read in media or even what has gone to court, you find a lot of governance challenges within those companies that have gone under. And I don't know what lessons you may want to share when it comes to governance issues within the market, especially the players who then do, stuff that is very questionable.
One of the things that I can say that there has been considerable improvement in terms of ensuring that there is minimal collapses or potential collapse. Mm-hmm. If you think about the stock market, we have not had any collapse for more than 10 years now. But if you wind the clock back, you'll find that we had a number of them who collapsed, especially in the late 90s and early 2000s. Mm-hmm. The major reason for why these ones collapsed is there were a number of challenges. One of them is, of course, governance challenges. We found that in some of them, because I was involved in some of these to see what was going on, some of them did not have clear checks and balances within their systems, so that it was easy for a player or a manager within a company that was trading to take money and invest it in the wrong places, even sometimes without reference to the investor. Now, that has been largely sorted out in the last decade or so. Now, at that time, we didn't have a lot of, oversight by the regulator. You do remember that our regulator is relatively new in relative terms. But when they got entrenched and they got to know their work, and in fact, they have done a fairly good work of ensuring that they can capture situations before they get out of hand. But that is a real possibility. There are many causes of this, and other than governance challenges. One of them, which looks beyond the control of a single person, is what we call systemic risks. You go back to, say, 2008, you find that in the US market, for example, we had what you call a financial crisis that came. And a lot of market players collapsed. Mm-hmm. They didn't collapse that the market was not regulated, because the securities market in the US is highly regulated. But it collapsed because there was a systemic issue, a matter that cuts across. And that spilled over into other markets like Kenya, because it ended up being a global crisis, although it was started in the US. Mm-hmm. There are those kind of things that can happen and create a lot of challenges. But the Capital Markets Authority have come with very stringent regulations. For example, there's what we call corporate governance regulations, and they specify exactly what the players should do in the market. They have even what you call business conduct regulations, which go into a lot of details, including even capital limits, how much you can invest, for example, in one, or in terms of exposure, or what is your capital, the minimum capital you require. It is possible that even when with all these very stringent regulated process, things can sometimes go out of hand, and you may find that somebody, sometimes very unintentionally, may find themselves in difficulties because maybe there was a big order and the person who was supposed to pay does not pay on time. Now, that can also cause a big problem if the order is big. But this is well taken care of up to a certain extent, but because of this, what we call the central depository clearing system, because they have created what you call another guarantee process to be able to ensure every order is settled, and then they take time to penalize the person who has failed to settle on time. So that is available. So we have another compensation level at the broker level, at the player level, apart from the capital markets compensation fund. We have that one available in the industry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's move the professionals who also are key players within the industry. Could you maybe mention a few of these professionals and what role they play within the whole ecosystem of investments?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question, because one of the things that you may find is that there are many people that are needed in the industry. The investment industry is just like any other industry. It needs the support of what we call service providers. And the service providers come in different shapes and sizes, and a lot of them are professionals. Take, for example, I'll give maybe 3 or 4 of these professionals that are involved. When a company is coming to the stock market for the first time, it will require legal professionals who will be able to look at the legal provisions or the legal documents for this company and certify that they are good, that they are in compliance with what is expected of them from a legal point of view. There will be accountants who will have looked at the financial records and checked and ensured that it's proper financial transactions record. There will also be people that will be needed in that called transaction advisors. And transaction advisors are general investment banks. And the members of investment banks are generally members of an institute that is called Institute of Certified Investment and Financial Analysts. They analyze, they check to see everything is proper and put the whole process on its tracks. And this goes on even after the company is listed. So you have even auditors who are needed on a regular basis. In fact, the CMA actually identifies or kind of says this is a good auditor, or this may not qualify to audit a listed company. They will also do remember they specifically provide that there is proper corporate records of every organization that is listed. Minutes of the board, governance issues are okay. These are done by company secretaries. Now, you can actually see that at every level, you have all sorts of people that do these things. So I've mentioned lawyers, accountants, company secretaries, I've mentioned investment analysts, and there could even be other people, like, for example, PR people, public relations. They are also professionals in their own light. They are needed to, for example, to look at the communication. How do you communicate with the shareholders? How do you communicate with the general investors in particular? So all these people are needed throughout the process. So I can say that professionals are needed throughout a transaction. Yeah.
All right. So I want to come to your personal experiences and personal journey, being a governance expert, having been in leadership for many years. You may have some lessons you want to share with us through your journey and learnings as we move forward. FCS.
Yeah, that is a very interesting question, because it's actually it can only be covered in a book situation for it to be, because it covers many years. And I, as you said, have been involved in very many of these processes, including creation of regulations. For example, when CMA was putting up its acts in order, I was heavily involved in drafting of the initial regulations, whether they are for collective investment schemes, or whether they are public offers and issues. And what I can say, and as a word, is that because we cannot be able to cover the whole of this, and is to give investors and people who want to invest in the market to be careful. The outcry that you hear every day, people saying they have been conned, or is because they have not taken care. My advice is that people who want to play a role in the market must take time to understand the market. That's one important thing. This is especially for younger people, because they have a future. And investing in the market is a very good type of investment. If you analyze investment positions across the globe, you'll find that capital markets investments have outdone or performed all other types of investments, whether you're in the US or in India, but it must be long term. A lot of times people want to come in and get out when the shares have gone down, and that time they will continue crying that they lost money, or if only they had waited. So these markets require patience, these markets require care, these markets require focus on what you are doing. Do not rush to do things and then regret later. My experience again is that people who survive in our markets longer are the people who try to keep to the rule. And there are people who have come and they thought they could make money quickly, and then now we don't hear of them anymore. They got into the wrong places. So it is very important that you'll appreciate that if you want to stay long, you must remain on the narrow path that is based on what I would call not guided by greed, but guided by the need to do the right things. And you can always choose to do the right things. And this is important. So we are saying that the whole issue of governance, you may have asked, why did I get into governance? It is simply because I thought that there were a lot of wrong things that were happening. And when we were promoting even the creation of the Center for Corporate Governance, that was the main motivator, that we wanted to go into all these companies and promote good conduct, good governance and ethical practice in these institutions, especially in listed companies, because there was also a lot of problems at the listed company level. And listed company is also an important player in the market. This is why I say we could not cover all of them. But a lot of things were happening in the listed companies that were not right. The boards were not properly constituted. And we saw that even the professional people, we knew of listed companies that did not even have a qualified chief accountant, and they were listed. So the governance promotion came to weed out this kind of practices that were not very well done. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So FCS, finally, you could face your camera and talk to us about the future of the markets, how it looks like, and some inspiration as we move forward. FCS.
Thank you very much. All I can say at this time is that the market is looking up. There are a lot of firms and efforts now to even internationalize our market. There are investment classes that are now available. Take, for example, you could which was not possible some years back. You can actually even buy international stocks through our own stock markets. You can actually be able to participate at the global level. So the markets are improving, they are changing, they are becoming better. But as I said, do not be taken for a ride by people that are not licensed. Insist on confirming that you are dealing with people that are reliable, and you can only do that by going to licensed people. And finally, let me put it this way. Young people in this country have a future, and this future can only be secured if they learn to become savers and investment. I've seen a trend in our day where young people spend all the money they earn instead of thinking about saving the money and then investing it. Save, because a saving culture is what will save you and save the country. Thank you.
That was our guest, FCS Job Kihumba, Director, Standard Investment Bank. We want to thank him very much, and also thank you for watching this particular program. This was a weekly governance voice, brought to you courtesy of the Institute of Certified Secretaries, powered by Bafunde. I am your host, Ubare Nyaega. Until next week, see you.